Hello chess fans and welcome to Chess 5. And today I'm going to show you how to checkmate a lone king with one rook and a king. And if you don't know how to checkmate with a rook, you are going to love this session because this session is going to be very short and you are going to learn very fast. I'm not going to waste your any time, so let's start instantly. So I'm assuming that you all know how a rook moves. Okay, and the position, first of all, what I want the position so that I can get the idea so that how can I checkmate black king. So the position I'm assuming in this position here is I'm assuming this position. The idea of this position in this position here you can see that the rook is attacking the king. The king cannot move in the 8th rank, and actually king cannot even go to the 7th rank because the king is covering the 7th rank. So this is the point. The king on e8 have got checkmated by the rook. This is the position I want in the game. Okay, so the basic idea, first of all, to checkmate a black king with a rook and a king is to first kick the king on this last rank or the last file. You can say anything. In this arrow you can see I want to kick the king in this last rank and the file, which will make me easier to checkmate the black king. Okay, so let's start. So I've decided what I want to do, so now I'm going to accomplish the goal. So let's start. So with this position on the board, it's white to play. So you can see the rook is covering this much area so that the king cannot enter in this area because the area is controlled by the rook. So the area that the black king can move here is this area. I'm highlighting the area with the green arrow. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the area from the black king and going to make the area mine, so that the king area will get shorter and it would be easier for me to checkmate the black king. So let's start. So it's white to move. So the most natural move in this position is to play rook to b2. First of all, to checkmate with a rook and the king, the coordination is must required. Okay, so let's start. So I'm going to play rook b2 in this position because by playing rook b2, first of all the rook is protected by the king on a1 and the rook is cutting off the b file, and now the king is having this much area left to go anywhere. So if it's black, so the obvious move for black in this position is to play king to d3. Okay, after playing king d3, I cannot play rook c2 to cover off more area, because if I play rook c2 in this position, black king is simply going to capture the rook and it's a draw. So that's why I cannot play rook c2. I want the coordination of the king as well with the rook. So in this position, I'm going to play king b1. Okay, by playing king b1, black is going to repeat the position by playing king c3. And many of the players usually play rook c2 check, but rook c2 check is not a good idea in this position, because by playing rook c2, you can see now the king is having many squares to go in this position. That's why at the place of playing rook c2 check, I'm going to play a waiting move, something like king c1, because by playing rook c2, the area that I've created is now gone. Is now no longer there. He can now play king b3. So this is not a good idea. That's why king c1 is a waiting move, which helps many times. So here king can play king d3. So now we are going to play rook c2, not rook to d2 check, because it's the same idea. The king is having many areas to go. That's why in this position I'm going to play rook to c2, cutting off this file, and if you see that the area of the black king is slowly and steadily getting shorter and shorter. This is what we are going to have. So after playing rook to c2, in this position black is going to play king to e3, or even if black tries to go up by playing king to d4 or king to e4, let's take king to d4. After king d4, we are going to come up with the king by playing king to d2. The idea of playing king d2 in this position here is I'm taking away this squares from the king, because now the king is controlling the square, so that the king cannot enter in these square. So if black tries to play something like king e4, now I'm going to play rook to c3. I'm going to take this rank and as well as this file, because the idea of playing rook c3 in this position here is the king is trying to go to f3 and I don't want it. I want to slowly and steadily take the square from the king. That's why rook c3 is the idea. The coordination of the king as well as the rook is very important. So after rook c3, if black tries to play king to d4, in this position white cannot give check to d3 because it's the same idea. I've told you many times that the king would be having many squares to go, so it's not a good idea. And I can't even play king to e2 because black will simply capture up my rook. So what I'm going to do in this position here is I'm going to play king to c2, because if you look closely, the rook on c3 is placed perfectly. It's doing a completely nice job. So in this position I'm going to play king to c2, going for a waiting move. If it tries to go to e4, now I'm going to come up with the rook to d3, grabbing more space, and the king is having much more less space than before, than when I started the position. So in this position, if black tries to play king f4, now I'm going to come up with the king. I can't play the rook because king will capture the rook, so I'm going to play king to d2. If he plays king to e4, I can't play check because he would be having many squares to go, so I'm going to play a waiting move, something like king e2. Playing king to c2 is not a good idea because he will simply repeat the position. That's why I'm going to play king to e2, grabbing more space. He's going to play king f4. Now I'm going to play rook to e3, grabbing more space. Now he's having very less space comparatively. From the start he was having this much space, but now he's only having this much space, way less. So after playing rook e3, if he plays something like king f5, now I'm going to come up with the king, something like king f3, grabbing more space. In this position, playing the rook is not a good idea because where would you place your rook? You can't play the rook on e4 to try to grab more space because king will simply capture up the rook. I want to play this move, but I can't play just right now. I have to play king to f3 first to grab up more space, and then followed by rook e4, grabbing more space. This is the idea. So after king f5, I'm going to play king to f3. The idea is to play rook to e4 in this position, going to grab more space, and black can't actually do anything. If you play something like king g5, now I'm going to play rook to e4, grabbing more space. If you play king to f5, now I have to play king e3 because I can't move the rook because rook is placed completely successfully. So the only move in this position is to move the king for white. So king g3 is first of all not possible because the rook is hanging, so I have to play king e3. So after black plays king g5, or even if black tries to play king g4 or king f6, then I'm going to bring my king in. That's why I am taking this position, king to g5. And after playing king g5, white is going to come up with his rook by playing rook f4, grabbing more space. And now black is literally having only 2 files left, and it's going to be close to checkmate. So after rook to f4, if black plays king to h5, now I'm going to come up with the king by playing king f3. If black plays king to g5, now I'm going to play king g3. Now black knows that if he goes to the corner, then white is going to play rook g4 and it's going to be game over soon for black. So black tries to play king to g6 in this position, not going to the last rank that I've discussed in the starting position. So after playing king g6, now I'm going to come up with the king by playing king g4, because playing the rook by giving a check, king will run away by simply playing king g5, king f5. The rook is placed perfectly. I want to grab more space, that's because I'm going to come up with the king g4. The coordination of the king and the rook is very important to checkmate with a single rook. After playing king g4, if black tries to play king g7, now we are going to come up with king to g5, grabbing more space, because the king cannot go to this f5 because the rook is completely controlling the area. So if black tries to play king to h7, Now I'm going to come up with the rook by playing rook to f6, taking away everything, and now black is having only 4 squares left. Yep, from the start and from the end, way less squares. Now if black tries to play king g7, now I'm going to play a waiting move, king to f5. Here we have king to h7. Now we are going to come up with the rook by playing rook to g6. After king h8, we are going to play king to f6. After rook to h7, king to h7, we are going to play king to f7, grabbing more space. And after king h8, it's going to be everyone who is thinking white is going to play rook to g7. Sorry, but this is a stalemate. If you look closely, black is having no way to go, and there's no check put by the white. It's a stalemate. This is what many players do in this position, and this is the wrong thing. First of all, before playing the position, you should always check that your opponent must have one move to make, so that it won't get stalemated. Remember this, guys. I always tell you in my every video that you should always, before playing the move, you should always check that the king should have at least 1 square to go, so that it won't get stalemated. And after playing king to h8, if you look close, there is only one move which wins for white in this position. Format in 1. Here we have simply rook to h6, and it's a game over for black. This is the complete idea, and many of you were thinking that why he's bringing the king. So we can also make something like this check. No, by playing rook to g7 check, it's a bad idea because the king is having many space to go. That's why at the place of rook g7, I bring my king to f7, and after playing king h8, it's checkmate. It's game over. This is what happens, and this is how we checkmate with a rook and a king. So I hope you all enjoyed this lesson to how to checkmate with a rook and the king. So if you really like this lesson, then please like to my video, and if you are new to my channel, then you can please subscribe to my channel, and you can also share this video with your friends who don't know how to checkmate with a rook and a king. This video is going to definitely help the king, help them to improve their chess skills. So I hope you all like this video. I'm going to come up with these new videos for you, so please stay tuned. The video was a little bit lengthy of 13 minutes, so I hope you don't mind it. So thank you for watching, and bye bye.